everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the promised second part of the spooky special. This is going to be a cautionary tale, as I mentioned before. It's very cloudy today, so I've had to bring in some extra light because I kind of wanted to get this thing over with and you'll see why as I go into what happened. If you are part of the Facebook group Ethereal Consciousness and have been there for at least a year, actually a little bit more than a year, you might have read the original post that I did at the time that this incident occurred. So I'm going to give a slightly more comprehensive explanation of what happened here. I'm also going to mention something that I did not mention in the original Facebook post because I have not discussed this with anybody since then, with the exception of my mother, who was also involved a little bit. This is a story, as I mentioned briefly before. I was not originally going to discuss this, but in light of some of the things going on in the world, some of the predictions that Alura has made coming true about horror starting to replace holidays such as Thanksgiving and Christmas, starting to see a lot more horror movies being released during the months of November and December, whereas before you didn't have that. And in light of the growing trends around not just spirituality in general, but the paranormal and some of the misconceptions perhaps that are out there, I felt that this was something that hopefully a lot of people would learn from, or at least keep in mind if you decide to dabble. For the record, I do not and have never, ever recommended that anybody dabble. Even when I didn't know a fraction of what I know now, I would not recommend that anybody dabble. So, I'm going to tell what happened first, and then I'm going to give some background information at the tail end of the video, because I think some of this may need to be clarified. So kindly reserve judgment, because there is backstory to this. So as some of you know, I've been working with Alura Cein as not just a mentor, but also a friend for a good few years now, quite a few. And doesn't really feel that long, but and yet in a weird way it does. It feels like it's been a lot longer than it has been. And over the years, we've formed a really good relationship. I trust her far more than I trust practically anybody else, with only a few exceptions. And her information, her guidance, the guidance that comes through her from the heavens has always proven to be very accurate. And as much as I try to follow it, sometimes I think I don't do that good a job sometimes. But hey, I'm human, I'm still learning. And over the years, we've had a lot of conversations about spirit, learned a lot about not just how reality works, but also how spirit works. There are a lot of theories. Some of them have pieces that are more accurate than others. In my own personal opinion, not just based on what she's taught me, but also on my own personal opinion, based on some of the things that I've noticed that do seem to be borne out by what she's taught me, and even some conclusions that I came to prior to even knowing that she was around, even knowing that she existed. And one of the conversations that we had, well, we actually had several conversations about it, was about divination methods. And you know the thing, crystal balls, tarot decks, oracle decks, Ouija boards, etc., etc. And one of the things that she did mention in connection with the Ouija board was that, yes, you definitely should not fool around with it. Even with her abilities and knowing as much as she knows, she really doesn't like Ouija boards. Not really that great an idea. Not just because of the fact that they have a lot of negative associations with them, but also people really don't know how to correctly use them. And even if they did, it comes with an inherent risk, and that is a method of communication that in some ways is riskier than others, even though there's more to it than that. One of the things that she mentioned in connection with me personally quite some time ago was that if I chose to get involved in spirit communication, that instead of using a traditional Ouija board, I use an angel board. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's basically the same thing as a Ouija board, except that it's been decorated with the much more positive symbolism of angels. There are an awful lot of people online who will claim that the angel board is safer, or in some cases even claim that the angel board is meant to channel actual angels. They take the term angel board literally. Don't take it literally. That's my recommendation. People really don't understand. It's not that common that anybody is able to, quote, channel an angel, unquote, because they don't really know what angels are. It's not something that happens that often, and there aren't very many people who can do it. And if there were, you would know about it. More than likely, you would know about it. So some years after that conversation, it took quite a while before we were even able to find an angel board, because they're not really that common, at least not now. The original one that I had wanted to purchase was no longer made, so I opted for a different one. I'm not going to show it. I might show it at some other point, but I'm not going to do it in this video, and I'm not going to say where I got it from or who made it. So over the years, there were quite a few things that changed, a lot of things in life that changed. Both my mother and I got into a much better place, got a lot of the things that we needed to get done. We moved into this apartment. We went through a lot of different changes in the years between the original move and when we actually started using the board. And eventually it got to the point where we were, after consulting with Alura, that yes, it was an option that we could choose to use at the time that we were talking to her. But again, she made it clear that this was a choice. And as we all know, there are consequences, positive and negative, to all choices, positive and negative. And I did not go into it lightly. My mother definitely did not go into it lightly. Even after she said that we were at a point where that was an option for us, we didn't do it right away. We didn't do it for, I think, several months. We kind of sat on it for several months at least. Until finally we decided, yeah, let's give it a try. And she explained to us very specifically what to do, what not to do, what precautions to take. Because even with the angel board, it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter what it looks like. An open door is an open door, period. And once you open that door, you don't have the ability to say, yeah, you and you are okay, you and you, no. So she gave us specific rules, strict instructions of what to do, what not to do, what to focus on, what not to focus on. And when we were ready, we decided, okay, we're going to set things up, and we started engaging in communication. She also told us, Alura also told us ahead of time, precisely what types of spirits you could actually communicate with that type of tool. Because that's actually all it is, it's a tool. It doesn't have, contrary to popular belief, it does not have any power in and of itself. It's a piece of paper with printed letters on it, and in our case, a piece of compressed paper and plastic that you put your fingers on, and standard Ouija board thing. It doesn't have any actual power in and of itself. It's the people who are sitting down and using it. There's a difference. Just having it is not really going to do anything because it's just a piece of paper. There's something else that happens that enables communication. That's all I'm going to say. So we did begin engaging in communication. Everything that Alura told us turned out to be true. Of course, initially, the communication was very stilted. Nothing much happened that easily. It took a while for us to kind of work up to the point where we were able to hold discussions very well. I kept in regular contact with Alura and shared the results with her. She gave us some insight based on what I was telling her. Then, at one point, I had done the board by myself and with my mother different times. So I was comfortable enough to be able to sit down and have communication on my own. And of course, it still worked because I wasn't the one pushing the planchette, and neither was she. So, one afternoon, I was home, my mother was at work, and I began having a board session on my own. The person who came through claimed to be an individual. I am not going to repeat the name, but this was someone who had come up recently in conversations with Alura. I'll come back to that later. This person was claiming to be someone who I had an interest in, and I remember at the time noticing that there was, whoever this was good at communicating, had a lot of energy, but there was something that was nagging at the back of my mind. So I later on stopped, after a little while, stopped the communication, ended it, did all the things that I would normally do. Later on, my mother came home, and I think maybe a couple days later, I don't remember what day, specifically what day it was on, but over the weekend, my mother really, really wanted to do the board because we hadn't done it for a while together. So I was kind of having a feeling like, I don't know. I don't really know that I want to. But I didn't want her to feel left out, so we started doing the board. Immediately, the same person, claiming to be somebody whose name I knew, came back, started talking. We went through the session, ended it. I, again, contacted Alura, told her what was going on. That evening, I was in the bathroom taking a shower. I had gotten out of the shower, and the bathroom door was open because I was gathering up all my stuff. And I remember going to the vanity and looking in the mirror. During what I needed to do at the sink. And then I think it was probably when I picked up the bath mat. Picked up the bath mat, slung it over the tub, and I turned to go back to the sink. And as I did, as I said, the door was open. The bathroom door is here. The hallway is here. There's a closet door, hall closet, on the right. And then the entrance to the parlor is directly across from the bathroom door. You've actually seen it in some of my vlogs and other videos, even recently, like with the Clean With Me video. I think you can see it. You can see the hallway and the entrance to the parlor. Also in that video, there is a floor lamp, a mid-century modern floor lamp that you notice that I moved from one end to the other. And at that time, the setup for the parlor was slightly different. So the freestanding lamp was basically where it is now, on the far right corner by the window, but it was in a slightly different position. So I could see out the bathroom door, through the hall, into the parlor, and I could see that lamp and I could see the window. And as I turned from the bathtub and the shower to go back to the sink, I saw, partly looked at and partly saw out of the corner of my eye, a figure that was taller than the floor lamp. The head was past the top of the window. Complete opaque black. Like it was wearing a black shroud, but completely opaque. Absolutely no face. But yet, I could tell that this thing was looking right at me and smiling like, I can't even start to imitate it, like a shark. And I immediately went and I saw it. I felt like I locked eyes with it. And next second, gone. The vibe that I got off this thing, you don't ever want to feel that. Take my word for it. You don't ever want to feel that. I think it was, I've never actually read any of H.P. Lovecraft's books, but I've seen excerpts, and he talks about the nameless horror or the nameless dread. That's what that was. This was not what, you sit down to a scary movie and you get the jump scares and everything, or you go on some scary ride and your adrenaline's pumping. That's not what this was. That is imitation fear. That's artificial fear. It's not even going slightly off a rabbit trail. Years ago, there was somebody I heard, probably on the radio, who, I don't remember if he was a physicist. I want to say he was a physicist, but he made the comment that he didn't believe most of what humans experience is genuine emotion, because if you notice, it's all tied to hormones. He believed that hormones were designed to mimic or react to certain energy, and that the energy that they're reacting to is pure emotion. Pure emotion is connected to something bigger than we are. And I personally think that there's probably quite a bit of truth to that. I'm sure I didn't word it in quite the right way, but this was pure emotion. You don't really know what genuine fear is until you have an experience like that. And even the emotion itself was there and then very quickly went away. But there was like the flavor, like the aftertaste of it. that lingered. So I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I just went on with what I was doing as if I hadn't seen anything. Went into my room, put on my pajamas, but I immediately contacted Alura, still outwardly acting like everything was normal. She almost immediately got back to me and said, "Oh my, yeah, that was not your imagination, that was real. That was something very bad. They do this when they're about to attach to you." Which was why, if you remember, I just said this being, I could tell, even though there was no face, was looking straight at me and smiling like a shark. And no offense to sharks, they get a bad rap. I'm just saying that was the sensation, like the stereotypical sensing of blood and water. That's what it reminded me of. So she gave me very specific instructions of what to do now that this thing had come through. This was actually the thing that was talking through the board. Now, I'll backtrack slightly and say, as I mentioned before, we were given strict instructions about what to do. We were told, stay very positive, do this, do that. We did all of that. This thing still came in. Not right away. All the previous experiences were very good. And we still talk to the good ones who came through. We know who they are. They know who we are. There are certain things that always happen. So everything is, we know the difference between something that's between that and this other thing. As I gesture to a completely black refrigerator. Yeah, why did I forget that word? Anyway. Yeah, the spooky refrigerator, yes. So she gave us very strict instructions now that I've seen this thing. And also, I had been asking her questions because of who this thing was claiming to be. I told her, I'm not too sure that particular person would come through an angel board. She said, yeah, he wouldn't. Yeah. No, that doesn't actually happen. So she gave us very strict instructions about what to do now that this thing was here. She said to start smudging, start cleansing, always, she told us before, always do some kind of shielding, imagine yourself in a bubble of white light. We get protective grids from her as well. So that is the real serious, the actual protection that you don't have to maintain a mental image of your entire time, but you should still be aware of it. So she said, cleanse, do not touch the board, do not touch anything, and not even my crystal collection, because I have a crystal collection. I collect crystals of various kinds. Have for years, have since I was really young. She said, don't even touch your crystals. Don't touch anything for, I believe, the period was at least 2 weeks, so at least 14 days. And she said, pray constantly. And she was going to start doing stuff from her end. And she said, keep in touch, tell me what's going on. Do not feed it any fear. That was a big part. Pray and do not give it any fear. So I said, okay. She said, if you start having other problems, we will take it to the next level. So both my mother and I started doing everything she said. We didn't talk about it. We didn't acknowledge it. We didn't feed it any fear. We didn't touch any crystals. We didn't touch any tools. We didn't do anything. All we did was cleanse, pray, spend time in our sacred space, of course, the sacred space that I got set up. That was okay, but everything else, completely shut it down. So, went 2 weeks, everything was good. Then right at the end of 2 weeks, I think it was maybe just 2 or 3 days after the 2 week period, there was something else that happened. this is one of the things that I did not mention in the group, because when I did bring it up, I didn't want to scare people more than they already were, because because they're my friends and they care about me, and I'm really glad that they do. But I didn't want to worry them even more than I had with the original post. And I posted this after pretty much everything was all over. So, after the 2-week period, maybe 3 days, I'm guessing about 3 days after the 2-week period, I was letting her know everything was going really well. But then, I can't recall if I actually saw something. Yes, I did see a second black figure. I'm pretty sure this was not the same one. Shorter. Again, completely opaque. And I told her, I think we got another one. I'm just going to restart the 2-week process over again. So, we did. During that time, one night, I went to bed, and I was in the process of falling asleep. While all this now 4-week time period of cleansing was going on, I had rearranged my bedroom somewhat, cleaned, reorganized, and rearranged my bedroom. And I had come up with the idea of creating a sacred space in my room. I used to have a sacred space that was relegated to my room, largely because originally I couldn't really be open about my own personal spiritual beliefs, so I had to stay in the broom closet, as we say. And I decided that the energy in my room needed to be changed up. Something really positive and wholesome needed to be brought in. So I ended up creating my own version of like a sacred corner or a prayer corner or holy corner. So I did that, and I had printed off several images of different, I'll just say different positive figures who I feel help me and who I feel connected to, inspired by. Very heavenly figures, or people who at least try to embody some of the angelic virtues. So I had printed those off, and I taped them on a wall in my room. And I have a table right under, I still have all this set up. A table and everything that was more positive, I put in that corner. And at the time, it's a little bit more built up now, but at the time, I just had the images, the table, and then I had an area, I'm trying to remember. Yes, I had hung up a hook, just attached a hook on the wall where I could hang some prayer beads. And at least I think I had the prayer beads at that time. And I had gone to sleep this one night while I was trying to go to sleep. I was laying in bed on my back, and I spent time reading one of my Bibles and praying at that corner. And that was how I ended the day, just before I got into bed. So I had done that same evening. I think I also played some prayer chants or something like that. And then I got into bed, turned off the light, closed my eyes, and I was just relaxing. And all of a sudden, I did not physically see, but I felt. There was absolutely no mistaking this feeling. This being, not a good one, standing in that sacred space, right in between the sacred space and my bed. Now, I sleep in a twin bed, so there's not that much space, and there's also not it's not a very big room. So there's not that much space between me and the wall where I have the table and the sacred space set up. This being was standing in that sacred space as like a mockery of it. And I felt it come over and stand right at the side of my bed, looking down at me. And just blasting me with this energy of not just fear, but I'm more powerful than what you believe in. What you've done isn't going to work. And I remember lying there and even though I did just sort of kind of open my eyes just enough to see if it had actually manifested as an apparition like the previous 2 times, which it hadn't. But the weird thing was I got a mental image of this thing standing beside my bed and laughing like it was mocking everything that I believed in and all the prayers that I had said and everything. Absolutely awful. You don't want to be that close to anything like that either, physically close to anything like that. I mean, it's nauseating. And I was lying there trying to decide whether or not I was actually going to get up, because I didn't know what this thing was going to do. I had when it's happening, you don't doubt it, because again, you're getting that pure emotion, that pure primal, visceral emotion. You don't have to ask what it is. Every section of your DNA knows exactly what that is, and doesn't question whether or not it's real, because you already know that it is. Every fiber of your being knows exactly what that is and doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And I remember, again, imagining myself in that bubble of white light, and it was mocking that as well. And I just stayed there still, trying to decide, okay, do I need to leave for my own safety? Or is this thing going to leave on its own? Because if I get up and leave, that's like ceding my bedroom to it. I'm not giving this thing my bedroom. It's mine. I was here first. Like, go get your own. And I decided that I wasn't going to get out of bed. I was going to, again, go through the 2-week process all over again, even though it wasn't 100% done, because we decided to give it like a wait period in between, right after the 2-week period. Still wait to see if there was anything that was going to happen. So I decided that I'm trying to think of exactly how to put it. While I was lying there being blasted by this energy, which I don't necessarily recommend that you do exactly what I did, but it suddenly occurred to me in the midst of that, how this happened, I'm not entirely sure. It had to have been my guides, because I was asking for help from them as well. And of course, this thing was mocking that. So even though I wasn't verbally saying anything, this is a key point, even though I wasn't verbally saying anything, I was thinking it. And this thing heard what I was thinking and was mocking everything that I was thinking. And as I was praying, continually asking for help from my guides, continually imagining that white light, all of a sudden I had this eureka moment that this was a test. It was all that I should treat this almost like a battle of wills, but something more. A battle of belief, a time when you choose what you believe in, you choose what path you're going to go down. And once that clicked with me, I went, oh, Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Even if I didn't interpret that 100% correctly, I had for some reason gotten really stubborn all of a sudden. And interestingly, the moment that I made that connection, the energy that I felt coming off this thing, for lack of a better way of putting it, hesitated. Uh, and I remember just firmly deciding I'm not going to doubt anymore. I'm not going to doubt my protection anymore. I'm not going to doubt. Um, well, I mean, I never doubted which side I was on, but I didn't doubt that I was, how should I put it, worthy, I guess you could say, of receiving help. And I laid there and I kind of started grinning and thought, I'm going to stay right here. I'm not going to give it any space. And if you do something to me, there's going to be heaven and hell to pay. Because everybody's going to know. So I stayed in bed and continued praying and praying and didn't doubt the prayers, didn't doubt the help. And I felt this thing progressively backing off, kind of like with a little, uh-oh, she's learning how to play. And it left, and I fell asleep like nothing had happened. And then I woke up the next day feeling great. Which is quite the roller coaster ride, let me tell you. So I had posted about the initial incident with a completely black form. I had posted about that after everything was said and done, after all of the stuff had taken place. I only mentioned that incident. Now, this was actually in between that original situation and the situation in my room. The situation in my room happened later. There was a period of peace in between these two. I'm going back now because this is where I'm going to get into the more nitty-gritty. After we had gone through the cleansing and everything, I had posted, everything was quiet. There was a period where everything was quiet, but we still were not doing the board. I had shared the original experience with the black figure in Alura's Facebook group, Ethereal Consciousness. I was on the computer in the evening, late. Sun had already gone down. I was still at home at the time. My mother was still at work because at that time she had a job that kept her past, like this was definitely in the fall, not quite winter, so in the fall right around this time. And at the time she had a job that the particular shift that she was on covered the dinner hour, and then she didn't get off until around 8 o'clock. So at the time, the sun had already gone down. I was on Facebook typing up my experience because Alura had encouraged me to share some things with the group. And as I was doing that, sharing the advice that I had gotten, everything that we were doing, everything was nice and quiet. I was in the process of, I think I was probably about 2/3 of the way through And as I was sitting right where I'm sitting now, you see the door here. There's a balcony. We have a balcony through those doors. So it was night and these blinds were shut. I was sitting here and I heard what was clearly this inhuman scream from outside the door that sounded like somebody, almost like somebody trying to imitate a cat in a cat fight. Because at the time, there are strays around here, and at the time we had several who would come up onto the balcony and drink from a water bowl that we have out there. And I had heard cat fights because they get territorial. This was not a cat. This was not a cat. This was that thing. In some ways, or at least in part, reacting to the fact that I was giving this warning. I'm not entirely sure that it liked that. But also there was a mocking sound to the scream as well, which is also significant because I'm very fond of cats, which I have no doubt it knew and was trying to play on. It was only one scream, very loud, very long, drawn out. There was no sound of a second cat, even if it had been a cat, which it clearly was not. There is no cat that makes that kind of sound. It sounds like somebody was trying to imitate a sound that they are not physically, they don't have the physical hardware to make that type of sound, but they were trying to imitate it. Just like when we say meow, cats don't actually say meow. So there was only one scream. There was no sound of a second animal. It was dead quiet outside, interestingly. Dead quiet. Absolutely no sound whatsoever. And it was so loud, I thought our neighbors had to have heard this. But I didn't hear anybody reacting. Not that I necessarily would, but in some cases I would. Because this thing was very, very close. It didn't quite sound like it was on the balcony. And I didn't feel like it was on the balcony. But it was near it. And I remember just pausing for a second and listening to it. And I knew exactly what it was. And I didn't even turn my head to look. I just type, went right ahead on typing, went right ahead on telling people, yeah, you don't mess with this stuff. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about it anyway. I don't care. So I felt intuitively like, well, first of all, this thing more than likely would have loved for me to actually go out onto the balcony and look for it. Or even to leave the building in the thought that it was a real cat who was hurt or something. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. It was never going to happen because I knew exactly what it was. But I could also feel it was not in the apartment. It was not in the apartment. It wasn't in the building. It was outside. And then shortly after, like maybe 10-20 seconds later, I felt like it had left, or at least backed off. It's interesting how, at least in this instance, once I kind of got a taste for that vibe, I could tell where it was, almost like a bad smell. And And thankfully, there was no bad smell because, you do hear stories where there are bad smells. Thankfully, there were none. But that was something that was actually happening as I was typing up the post in the group. And I made an executive decision to not mention it. In part because I hadn't posted the original post yet, and I wasn't sure how people were going to react to it. Because it is a controversial topic, communication predominantly with anything that barely resembles a Ouija board is kind of controversial. Now, going into some of the backstory, everybody in the group was supportive, telling me, be careful, make sure that you're okay. So nobody was bad-mouthing me because I had chosen to do this. Practically everybody did say that for them, the possibility of having communication with ancestors, spirit guides, through something like that was not, to them, not worth the risk of something going wrong. And I fully understand, and if I were anybody else, I would say exactly the same thing. And I don't recommend that people fool around. But during this time of year, you got a lot of people who do fool around, unfortunately. But even that, I think, is, in all honesty, as somebody who was in New Age, who was in Wicca, who, seen all different kind of stuff going on in the spiritual community, the idea that everybody fools around with these things predominantly during this time of year, that's kind of a misnomer. That's kind of stereotype. It doesn't happen just during this time of year, just during spooky season, or what we're now calling spooky season. It happens all year round. One of Alura's recent videos where she talks about spirit and hauntings, and also false hauntings, not just residual stuff, but false hauntings where a dark spirit will use energy of a place to fake a haunting as a way of getting that fear energy from people who believe in it, and people's belief continually manifesting more and more of that haunting, and then they draw on that energy and use it to do what they want to do, not just scare other people, but I'm saying this, do what they might want to do someplace else, whether that's in the physical world or someplace else, because you don't know. They're not always, just because you got something that's attached somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean the spirit's always going to, for lack of a better way of putting it, physically be there. They don't have to be. They can be pretty much anywhere and still be attached. As long as they're attached, they can come and go pretty much as they please. That's my understanding. And in my own case, this was something that, because of things such as my soul contract, past life stuff, lessons that I've learned in this life, work that I've done with Alura, things that I'm supposed to do in successive lives probably, because all of your journey, all the lessons that you've learned from the time you were created to whenever, are all ultimately going to lead to something. And I have absolutely no doubt that this experience is going to lead to something. I have no doubt that experiences with the angel board, which we do still use, I will say, we do still have it, we do still use it. We have not had any negative experiences since. We're very vigilant. We now know exactly what to do if something goes wrong. We always have spiritual backup. We've always got Alura. We don't doubt it. I personally came out of this a lot, I guess you could say a lot stronger, but also both the good and the bad experiences have really solidified the reality of the spirit world for me and really driven home the fact that, contrary to what an awful lot of people in New Age were preaching, the spirit world is not all pure light. And if you run into something negative or dark, it is not a projection that you are creating yourself. Because there are an awful lot of people who think that. But the reality is, there are horrible things that happen to very good people. If everything was just some kind of a shadow projection from them, how do you explain some of the things that have happened to people who are genuinely not that dark or not dark at all? Like, how do you explain some of the negative paranormal stuff that's been done to children, or even negative stuff in the world in general? How do you explain that if you're going to say, oh, this is, without saying the words, basically your own fault, you're doing it to yourself? No, no, no. Not with pure visceral primal fear. No. Mm-mm. No. That did not come out of me, I can tell you. Did not come out of me. I have absolutely no doubt what that was. So my advice would be, do not play around with a Ouija board. Don't play around with an angel board. The odds are very, very high that you probably don't know everything that you really need to know. And for heaven's sakes, do not learn from paranormal shows. Don't. I'm sorry. I'm not hating on anybody because I don't watch any of that stuff. There was a brief time when I did because I'm me. And I do have a dark edge, I admit. Not that dark. There's a big difference between having a dark edge and being dark, okay? Big difference. Spooky refrigerator. And because even if a lot of what some of them are showing might not be faked, I'm not saying that they all fake stuff. I don't think that they do. But there are an awful lot of things that you really need to learn before you even go anywhere near stuff like that. And pretty much all of the ones that I used to watch, even at the time, I could see, no, first of all, they're not actually helping anybody. They're not actually helping anybody. You don't hear about them having very strong spiritual connections and taking a lot of precautions. You don't hear about any of the kind of spiritual training that they're going through. I mean, I've only heard of one who I would see as more trustworthy, apart from the late Ed and Lorraine Warren, because they were much more serious-minded. Doesn't matter if you believe them or not. They were a lot more serious-minded than a lot of these shows that you see nowadays, at least many of the ones that I was seeing. It's not something that you toy with. Good intentions are only going to get you so far. There are people who are meant to do certain things and people who have certain gifts. But doors are a lot easier to open than they are to close. You don't often hear about how to close a door. You hear about how to open an awful lot, but you don't hear about how to close them. And once it's open, pretty much anything can come through. And there are inherent risks with any type of spirit communication. If people are telling you that you can use an angel board to talk to angels, I'm sorry. It ain't true. It ain't true. That is not to say that you might not get your guides, that you might not get your ancestors, because I will say that I personally have had, and both myself and my mother, we have conversations with our guides, have conversations with our ancestors. Information, we've been given information that has been confirmed. And there are an awful lot of benefits that we get out of it. But talking to angels, no. And if you stop and think about it, they're really, and when I say they, I mean certain people. I can't name any names. Even if I could, I wouldn't. But there's been this spiritual trend for quite a while to make it seem like it's really easy to talk to angels. Do you honestly think that it's that easy? Do you honestly think that you can talk to a literal angel by putting down a piece of paper with the alphabet on it? And a planchette or a pendulum or whatever? Do you really think it's that easy? Do you really think that you can reach something that pure and that high and that advanced, for lack of a better way of putting it, on a $10 board, or however much you pay for it? No. And people who view it just as a game, it's not real. 9 times out of 10, maybe you won't end up with anything trying to attach to you, but the bottom line is, it is something that can be used to open a door, and you're not going to, I mean, we're human beings. What do we know? Seriously, what do we know? What do we know? We can't even tell when a door is being opened. Have you noticed? We can't tell when there's a door being opened unless something actually comes through in such a way that is very noticeable to us, and usually that way is going to end up being very negative, because it's going to start affecting us in a very negative way. And even sometimes then, people are slow to realize that something's wrong. And I do think some people actually think that they would know if something was attached to them. I've had attachments before. You don't know. You don't. Because you're still in here. So you think everything is normal, really. Speaking to somebody who, I mean, most people have had spiritual attachments before. That's not to say that they're all demon possessed. There's a big difference between having an attachment and being demon possessed. And even demon possession is not like what you see in the movies. It's not, full-blown special effects from The Conjuring or something like that. That's not to say that that the different entities can't show up in an apparently physical way, or at least in a visible way, or make you think that you're seeing something when really you're not, because they will mess with your head. They will mess with your head. They'll mess with your emotions. They'll mess with pretty much everything. They'll try to ruin your lives. They'll give you runs of bad luck. They'll give you health problems. I mean, that was actually one of the byproducts, Alura hinted, of some of the attachments that we used to have, was health problems, financial issues, etc., etc. And was that our fault? No. It was just something that happened. And there can also be things that you inherit. And again, that's not your fault, but that doesn't mean you should go out and dabble. That doesn't mean you should treat something as a game. Anybody who tells you that the Ouija board or any type of divination is a game, it's not. It's not. That's not to say that you can necessarily become possessed from, let's say, using a tarot deck, because that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other conversation. But I felt that this was something that I did need to share, even though I didn't really want to, because I wanted to put it out there as a warning, especially during this time of year. It's not a game. Spirit is not a game. Doesn't matter what you call it. Doesn't matter what your tradition is, what terminology you're using. You don't dabble. It's sacred for a reason, and it needs to be kept sacred, and it needs to be treated appropriately. We don't know half of the things that we need to know. We are blind to 99.9% of what's in creation, and the spirit world is part of natural creation. We might not label it as such because, again, it's not visible to most of us. But it's not something that you play with. It's not a toy. It's not there for your amusement. And try to keep yourself safe. Just try to keep yourself safe. So that is the spookiest story that everybody wanted to hear, or stories that everybody wanted to hear, because they're all connected. And I hope that you have a blessed and safe Samhain. I hope that you are enjoying the fall weather wherever you are. Hopefully you do have fall weather. We definitely do now, thank goodness. And that you hopefully think twice before getting involved in stuff. That's not to say that you should be afraid of spirit. I'm not saying that at all. Don't be, because I think it is easy to paint the spirit world as completely black or completely white. It's not. It's a very broad spectrum, much broader than we're taught, really. And an infinite creator does create infinite creation in infinite variety infinitely. That's what I've always said. And be careful what you give your energy to. Sometimes it comes back to bite you. So take care. Bye.